We live in a fast-paced and hectic world where it's easy to feel overwhelmed, stressed, and out of control. How do you manage all the competing pressures without losing sense of yourself? How do you stay focused enough to not only plot a path, but follow it? Welcome to Master Your Life, a show that offers inspiration, insight, and intelligence, as well as success stories from many walks of life that can show you how you can control your own destiny. Our knowledgeable and entertaining host and her guests give practical advice that you can use every day in the quest to master your life. Now, here's your host, Leaha Mattinson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's show. I'm Leaha Mattinson, and thank you so much for everybody tuning in to listen in from wherever it is you are on this beautiful planet. I really appreciate your time and energy and sharing all these podcasts with your friends and family. And want to just a big shout out to the now 200,000 plus downloads that we have each month. So thank you, thank you, thank you. This week, it's my divine pleasure to welcome to the show Dr. David Hardy. Dr. Dave, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. Yeah, excited to be back. So we got an important subject here that probably a lot of people don't think about because, of course, for them, things are working out fine at the moment. But if you gave some thought to it, I'm sure you've realized that in your past, you've probably had difficulties with it and that you definitely know somebody who's struggling because of it.
Yeah. And so today we're talking about balance. Balance. And the reason this came up was because I was surprised in a conversation with my longtime best friend, who shall remain nameless, but she was diagnosed with MS, quote unquote, a few years ago. And part of the interesting conversation ongoing with the neurologist has been her balance. So she struggled with balance at work. It was so bad that she would be, leaned against the wall, trying to keep herself upright at work, and so that nobody would be able to see her struggling. Because she was a highly paid executive, she didn't want anyone to know, exactly what was going on. And she said there was just nobody to talk to. So she didn't. She would get herself into the boardroom. She would sit down, prepare for the meeting, go through the meeting, and then walk her way back to her office with using the wall as her crutch all the way to the office, and just making sure that the coast was clear because she did not ever want anyone to see her. And I think that developed when she was around the age of 50. So she had been struggling with some other things up to that. But that sort of big symptom, so now this is flash forward probably, 5 or 6 years later. And as we were talking about her most recent neurological appointment, she was telling the neurologist that she'd had some improvement and the things that she'd been doing to improve her condition. And the neurologist was just didn't actually make any comment, didn't give her any credit for there being any improvement, just nothing. And so as a result of that conversation and a few others, obviously, in the Huntington's disease community, because balance is a huge thing, I thought we should talk about this today. And who better than to talk to about it than with our lovely neighborhood functional neurologist, Dr. David Hardy. So Dr. Dave, for those of you who haven't tuned into any other episodes, is from the Collegiate Sports Center, operating out of there in Red Deer, Alberta, Canada. You can check out his work by going to all of his social media handles and coming obviously to masteryourlife.ca to check out, I think we've done 9 episodes on neurological health. And so just take a moment to note that down and go in and check out those other podcasts. But today we're going to dive right into balance and why it's so important. What do you think about that story, Dr. Dave? Is that like a normal?
That blows my mind. And first off, you hit right on the psychosocial aspect of it. And that is just how people that are in higher end positions don't feel like they can ever come forward with things that are bothering them, and that there's no supports for them, that the higher up you go, sometimes the more isolated you are from everybody around you. And that just blows my mind. You have somebody who's struggling and her colleagues are going to pick up during a meeting, even if she's sitting down, that things aren't right, even if they didn't see her walk down the hall. And yeah, that just blows my mind how she was kind of in that realm of where she thinks she has to keep it a secret from everyone around her, that it's such a competitive atmosphere that anything going wrong with you can take you down. And that's just not a place where I think we should be at in society, with all these high level people with a lot of skills.
Yeah, it's quite inhuman. It's very inhuman. It
is, yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, this happens to so many different people, and balance is it's the key to life. It keeps us on our feet, and basically how the nervous system develops is, touch, feel, sounds, all of it start to build the rest of the brain. And then too, when these systems start to go, then you start to notice decline in other areas of the brain. And with balance too, like, how well can you think if I spun you around and made you dizzy and then gave you a little shove?
Not well.
And then how do you feel? Like, your anxiety shoots through the roof. Like, you feel like you're going to fall and hurt yourself. And outside of the age group that we give teenagers car keys, falls are one of the leading causes of traumatic injuries. It's insane.
Repeat that again. Repeat that again.
Yeah. Outside of that age group, we give teenagers keys to a car. And falls are one of the leading causes of traumatic injuries.
Yeah. And who would have ever thought that?
Yeah.
Right. So really soak that in, because oftentimes when we fall down, when we have falls, we don't actually tell anybody because it's embarrassing. Right. It's like, man, I've slipped. I live in Canada. I slip on the ice. It's like, woo, there's, besides the, Huntington's, there's just other dangers where you're falling down, and there's the potential of wiping out is real. And so, yeah, but we don't tell anybody because it's embarrassing. Like, the first thing you see people do when they lose their balance is they blush like crazy. Right. And then most people blush like crazy, and then they try to hide, go, I'm okay. It's all right. Nothing to see here. Right. Isn't that our first response?
Yeah, it actually, kind of a silly thing too, is I get my chiropractic patients, I get a lot of people that walk in with sleep related issues. So it's like, I fell asleep, and of course you're turning and you're moving in your sleep, but some of the postural systems, of course, they're kind of asleep as well. And then you start to kind of wake up with that kink in your neck or back pain just from sleeping. And that's not even being on 2 feet yet.
Right.
So those systems will kind of go up and down all the time, depending on your level of alertness, or to say better, that part of the brain's function and ability to work properly.
And so what part of the brain is it?
You're looking at basically your midline structures in your brainstem. So basically they're the first systems that start to develop, and everything else kind of gets built out farther from there. So the brain develops basically bottom up, and then center, midline, outwards. And these centers of the brain are right in kind of the middle part, and are responsible for so many different functions, and then it connects to everything else. So it's just fascinating how this part of the brain is overlooked in a lot of disorders as well. So oftentimes you can see somebody with high anxiety, and you kind of look at the way they're moving and something's off. Or you can look at somebody who you can kind of pick the children from across the football field that just don't move properly. And then you start to ask, okay, well, are there other issues? Like, how's their academic learning happening so far? And usually there's something going wrong there. And then, of course, there's even some research and ideas around this being one of the multiple kind of dysfunctions and all sorts of other disorders. And just developmentally speaking, you can usually kind of point across and see which child has autism by kind of the way they move. There's sort of a stereotypical way that they move. And then you get closer and then you start to realize, okay, facial expressions, lack of eye contact, and then you go into everything else and you start to realize, okay, there's multiple things going on here. And I noticed it basically from looking how they walk and the facial expressions. And then I built onto that with the academic and the social learning and everything else. But usually when we start looking at the academic stuff and the social learning, we forget about all the other things we noticed and observed in the first place that gave us insights into how the brain of that child was working and functioning.
Right. And why is that a not good thing? Why is it?
Because then therapeutically and treatment-wise, we're missing out on windows into how to affect the nervous system and get people better. And that's been a disservice to so many people out there, and it needs to stop.
So let me ask this just to clarify, because what I think you're saying is that when people notice there's a problem with the physical movement of a little person, then they take them to whatever regime of doctors and get them involved in that kind of care, and they forget about actually coming back and fixing the body or healing the body.
Right. They forget about the foundation of the brain.
Yeah, this is key, critical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that millions upon millions of people are dealing with autism. I mean, there's countless examples of other things, but that's just such a good one to percolate on for a few minutes, because treatments of autism often are fairly intrusive, and those kids and families have been poked and prodded and just so much pressure to either be normal or to fit into some sort of category or whatever. And that takes it away from actually dealing with this foundational physical first sort of sign and symptom. So are you saying then that there are some treatments that people can use if they have, we can talk about the causes, and we'll save the treatments to the end, but I just want to ask, are there treatments for people who've got balance issues, including autism, including other things, that can help them to have a better quality of life?
Exactly. You really need to start looking at the foundational aspects of the brain, which is processing sensory information, and balance being a key one. And it's actually multi-sensory integration. So to kind of make that sound more fluid for people, is there's three senses that keep us up on our feet. There's going to be feel, so proprioception, feedback from muscles and joints. If you stretch a certain direction, you feel it, you know it. If you put too much weight on one joint and try to push off, you feel it, you know it. Okay, and the brain's processing all of that. And that's a huge part of it. And then you've got your balance sensors in your inner ear, which are going to tell you when the head moves, whether it's moving forward, up, down, or at an angle. All of that's going to be integrated. So some people, when they turn their head one direction, they start to get off balance. So right there, the integration just between feedback from your muscles and joints of the neck with your vestibular system, the inner ear, firing at different rates, aren't in sync.
Right. This is a fun little test for those of you at home. You can stand up and get really do your own test. This is become your own practitioner, and really be standing and take a look, turn your head to the right slowly, turn your head to the left slowly. If you see that your balance is impaired, it's just one of those things to notice.
Yeah.
Like noticing is the first thing, right? And I'll share this other little anecdote because it's kind of cute. My mom, who's 76, has been caretaking for my father, who has Huntington's disease, for a number of years. And my father passed away recently. And so my mom's sort of getting back into the care of self a bit more. And so part of that is that she's actually started walking again, more walking. But she got onto the treadmill and she was like just laughing about how unsteady she's become, because she just hasn't actually been attending to that really simple walking thing. And she said, like, my balance, I've noticed that my balance is not what it was, and I really need to get it back. And again, not just because it's it feels uncomfortable to be out of balance. Like it feels uncomfortable and like you're not certain and sure-footed, and psychologically it's hard.
Yeah.
Right? So,
And we do these and we look at somebody and we go, oh, they look so uncoordinated. They look awkward.
mm-hmm.
And right there, that kind of says they look awkward. Chances are there's a good part of their brain too that feels awkward when you can't even kind of take a step, and people, oh, I've always been awkward or something like that nature, or oh, I've just haven't taken care of myself recently. Mm-hmm. And well, that's actually a bigger issue than a lot of people are thinking it is. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is the other sense that feeds into this whole system is, of course, vision as well. So you see some people, they're okay when their eyes are open, and then all of a sudden they have a big spill or tumble, say if the sun glares into their eyes or they're in the dark. Mm-hmm. Then of course they go straight down and hurt themselves. And and once again, it's maddening too. Just kind of like your friend was saying there with walking down the hallway, and just the feeling of being awkward or not being able to perform is maddening. Mm-hmm. And then you add into it, well, once again, how well do you think if you're kind of in that state of not being able to steady yourself properly? And then, of course, all that anxiety, the drive from these primitive brain centers firing up and saying, there's something wrong here, is going to take away your impact to perform and live life to the fullest that you want. So there's seeing awkwardness, uncoordination, people that are kind of stiff and uncertain. All of these, once again, are multiple things. And if we bring it back to the first thing we kind of observe before we start to worry about that person, is going to be how we're processing balance and our own bodies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's why I do. I have a standing desk, is because I'm always observing how's my balance. Really, I stand a lot. And it's funny, but because of the whole Huntington's thing, just going, no, I want to be aware of if there's things that are changing, and the only way I can be aware of that is to draw attention to it, right, and go, okay, like what's going on in this body. But it makes me very aware of what's going on with other people as well. So I watch for that. And it's a funny, when they do the stride or is it gait analysis for people who've got all kinds of movement disorders or the possibility of movement disorders. So again, this is something you can do at your own house. Is like walk across the room, just putting one foot in front of the other and see how your balance is. And then turn around and come back and go to the other end. I'm a big fan of self-identification. So there's the identification of what's going on in your own body. And then there's the identification of what's going on in other people's bodies, like that are not yours, because we observe lots of things in other people and go, well, isn't that strange? And isn't that odd? And isn't that like, I wonder if they're okay, that kind of thing. But right. Often we don't turn this, the scope to ourselves and go, okay, hang on here. What's going on?
It's our normal. And
right.
If we're actually going to look at, once again, how well we're performing, instead of waiting for that period where things finally reach that threshold with us where we go, oh, there's something wrong. There's probably something kind of an issue beforehand. And another great self-assessment tool, and this is used in multiple, like if you just Google one leg balance, eyes closed or something, it's going to give you so much information on other things. Yeah. Well, some people can't even really balance on one leg, eyes open. So the whole eyes closed thing, when you take away one of those senses, is just horrific for them. And the other thing too is, like, yeah, we notice with hyper intelligent people sometimes too, they move differently as well. But with the hyper intelligent people too, basically you're seeing too much information going up the centers of the brain. And yeah, they've got this gift of being very intelligent, but at the same time, you've got this increased drive, and it's probably hitting, once again, some of those anxiety centers too. And there's always this fine line between gifted and madness type things. So that also kind of gives us an insight into these. And with those people that are hyper intelligent, they've already learned so much information. Probably the next thing for their own feel good and brain development, brain performance aspect would be to work on the coordination and balance exercises as well, instead of just saying, oh, I've always just been uncoordinated and awkward type thing. So
yes,
the scope of things really goes from people that are, once again, haven't developed properly to people who have been injured, whether with a physical trauma or whether it was chemical related toxicity or viral or bacterial. All of those causes, once again, damage to this circuitry. And just like your friend with multiple sclerosis, where the immune system's attacking its own tissue, that's trauma within the brain. And then all the way up to, once again, how we perform in our middle years of life are going to determine how we start to decline later in life as well. And even if there is a condition where, like in Huntington's disease, where there's a good probability that this is going to take place, is you want to make sure that that system is as healthy and vibrant, so that hopefully people, once again, can function longer, even with the development of something, say genetic or something in that realm. So there is a lot of hope for people out there, and things that they can take control of is the biggest thing.
So a couple of things there, I think that I would love to dive a little bit more into what are some common balance things that you see people having, or en masse in your profession, what you see other practitioners dealing with. And again, it's just an invitation for the audience to be thinking about, does this apply to me? And then what would be sort of steps to take to be well? Like we've talked a little bit about working on that muscle coordination and the balance coordination. I was a gymnastics teacher for 35 years as well. Yeah. And started a couple gymnastics clubs. So, and I'm a Qigong teacher. So, we do balance and whatever, but it's all really, it's very much a work in progress, that's for sure. And even though we do all those things, many of us with Huntington's really have worked on our motor skills for a long period of time to be very robust and healthy. When that deterioration starts to happen, you need to be able to have somebody to talk to about it, and for there to be acceptance and support as well, so that we don't get the idea that we can just muscle our way through everything, because sometimes you can't. And then it's like, what do you actually need to do to accept and work on things the best that you can? Yes. Yeah. So those things, like, who do you trust? That was one of the things that really stuck out from our conversation. And I've done, like with my friend, I did another podcast with just talking about not being able to tell anybody about what's going on, because it's just so much risk of you losing your job, losing friends, your financial security, uncertainty. So those, like, they're big impacts in your life. And some people don't have any of that real world support. I think a lot of people have emotional support, but they don't necessarily have real world support. So when they lose their job because they have an illness, or they're not earning income, it's like they don't have that stuff in place. And so it's harder to even consider being healthy because you're out of balance in the material world. So there's all of this. Yeah.
And unfortunately, in a lot of places too, if you lose that financial support too, then the quality of care can be not as good. And that's also an aspect to things, unfortunately. especially right now, I think with a lot more therapies and knowledge coming out on different disorders, is that it's not in that mainstream. And that becomes very frustrating to a lot of people, is that the healthcare equality just isn't there. And especially too, once again, it depends when it happens in life. And this has been a major concern for a lot of patients in the concussion and brain injury realm that I see. And I look at a lot of the support groups that are comments made in the support groups on social media, and there's a lot of despair that people can't find the right care, and of course there's less emotional support talking back and forth through a computer than there is in real life. So a lot of these people do become really housebound as well, and lose out on a lot of the networks. And then to go out of the house requires more supports and more care, especially depending on how bad off that person is. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when you're kind of in that middle of the road there, where things are bad but don't require healthcare assistance from the system per se, sometimes those people are the ones that develop a lot more anxieties and mental health concerns around their condition as well. And I think that's, once again, a very one of the ways the system is broken is because you have people that are close to being very functional that are slipping through. And two, with a lot of these disorders, is that they are basically not invisible, but people can't.
You look like you're fine. You look like you're fine, right? So
you put on a show like
yes,
your friend there, and somehow make it through that meeting or part of the day, and then your life turns back to absolute sheer madness, chaos, and crap.
And crap. That's right. Completely out of balance.
Yeah.
And so this part of the reason for doing this show definitely has always been about that, trying to keep your insight, intelligence, and inspiration to live a masterful life within your own body. So bringing on tools that are maybe not of the main, so that people are becoming more aware of how to take care of their own health and well-being. And like, so we talk about, like, there's things in the 3D world to help you to financially prepare for your any kind of issue that might come up. Like, there's insurances that people can put in place and that sort of thing, so that you're covered for accident and injury and all of that. And then they're still getting to your appointments. So let's say you have the 3D stuff in the world figured out, that your finances are okay. And you've got something going on in your family that is a balance issue. So whether that's a child, or it's a teenager, or it's a young adult, is there any sort of straightforward path of where a person could go, or what kind of information they could seek that would help them to figure out what next steps would be?
Right now, it's all over the map, to be honest. And I think, too, part of it is a lot of professions are starting to realize that their modalities or their skill sets fire into the brain and affect the brain. But it hasn't, at this point, evolved into that clear picture of it. One of the things that I'd always see was, I think a few support groups actually posted it. It was that, yeah, my doctor knows neurology but doesn't do therapies, and my therapist does therapies and exercises and modalities but doesn't know the neurology. So there's been that huge gap behind everything. Mm-hmm. And that gap's starting to obviously be filled. And but once again, it's it's up to that individual practitioner to start taking all these extra courses and everything else after they've completed their regular training. And they're not, quite often they're not compensated for that. And I think that's kind of where the system's at. And it's one of those things that really innovative, or even if it's old knowledge being turned into recent knowledge and applied better, once again takes a lot of time to learn. And a lot of the practitioners, depending where they practice, are not going to be in a system that will actually reward and push these practitioners into doing it. And the other thing is, in healthcare, we really like to separate health into either the tool that the practitioner uses. Okay, well, I prescribe, I do adjustments, I do massage, I do soft tissue work, I do this or that. So tools of that practitioner or body part. And there really is no consistency through the whole system with the body and with the tools being used.
So, Dr. Dave, what is missing from the healthcare system?
Oh, wow. It's of course kind of a mess there. We talked about how individuals are sliding and falling through. What's missing on this side of things is that gap between knowing exercises, modalities, therapies that have an effect on the brain, and knowing the actual nervous system and how that functions, so you can match both of them up. And then I'd even take it a step farther and go, once you know the neurology side of things and the stimulation side of things, the therapies, then what's missing in the metabolic immune side of things as well? And how do you support that tissue? One of the comments I saw in one of the support groups that kept coming up was that, yeah, my neurologist knows neurology but doesn't do therapies, and then my therapist knows therapies but doesn't know the neurology. And it was this giant vicious circle between the two.
Yeah.
And of course, that's what has been missing in this side of things. And you would think that the system rewards and pushes people to fill that gap, but it's the opposite. It's a large, of course, bureaucracy that you're trying to keep stable and moving. So it's not a place for innovation. And it's been more kind of, once again, the private practices and individual practitioners that are going out and learning this stuff on their own. And then, of course, it's how do you keep that going forward? And it's a nightmare for both the practitioners and for the people that are affected, and it's really struggling with different disorders out there. We know the conventional, the balance system's a push-pull between different centers, right? It's really a balance of different centers. And those centers use the same chemicals. So the chemical therapeutics haven't worked well. And then the other crazy thing about the healthcare system is we like to divide things either by body part or by the clinician's tool. Well, that tool is, I prescribe, I do nutrition, I do exercises, I do adjustments, whatever. It's all decided by either body part or by tool. And quite commonly in the brain world, the tool doesn't matter till you figure out what tool's needed. So that part of the aspect is completely missing. Like, I'll go to events where, hey, explain what you do. And the first question I always get asked is, oh, what therapies or tools do you use? And I'm always like, you're missing that huge chunk of the picture, and that is to figure out actually what part of the brain nervous system is not working properly, so you can find the correct tools to match up with that. And
so what first question would you like people to ask? What would you like people to ask you when they meet you? Not what tools do you have, but...
Right. It would be, yeah, how do you figure out what's going on in somebody's brain?
How do you figure out what's going on in somebody's brain? That's a great question. How do you figure out what's going on in somebody's brain?
It's by, once again, first learning a lot about the nervous system, and then going through different tests that are going to tease out different deficiencies. And the neurologic examination's been around for a long time. But instead of looking at it to diagnose pathology, what we're doing is we're using it to figure out what parts of the system aren't functioning well. So then we can match it up with the right tools. And then the results go through the roof. And like one of the examples that I use is, you want to walk into a group of a bunch of IT people and say, hey, what code do you use? Oh yeah, 𝐸36721T. Oh yeah, that works for everything.
It doesn't? No.
Right?
Hold on.
You kind of want to figure out what part of the computer or software isn't functioning properly before you put a code into it, and otherwise you're just blindly guessing or going off of what works.
Yeah, because the brain controls so much stuff. And I don't even know if people really give credit where credit is due with the brain stuff, because it was taught for so long, really is in our cultural belief that the brain doesn't change much. It's hardwired. What you get is what you got. If it's been injured, there's not too much you can do with it. That really is the predominant belief. But through, neurologists who have done some really specific and good work around research. So Dr. Norman Doidge is somebody that we both say, yes, good job there, Dr. Norman Doidge, and check out his books, which is The Brain That Can Heal Itself. And there's a second edition as well. And he's got other work, obviously. But until you understand, first of all, that the brain can heal itself, I don't even know if people consider it. And they also don't consider what are all the things that this brain is controlling, because often you think when you've got a neurological problem that you actually have a problem with your willpower or your impulse control, or there's something wrong with you fundamentally, like you're a bad person. I must be a bad person because I can't figure out actually how to do whatever this thing is. I can't stop being angry. I can't stop yelling at my kids. I can't stop falling over. I can't, I can't stop eating. I can't stop.
Why don't you try harder?
Right. Try harder, Leaha.
It's like that person's trying their hardest to get through. Or another one that's maddening is, oh, it will get better by itself.
Oh my gosh. Right. That just is like, if you're not watching this on YouTube, you're missing out on my facial expressions, which are quite, let's say, yes, accurate.
Thing we've seen and been through.
That's right. Yes, it's just not true. It's so not true. When your brain is not working, there is so much catastrophe. It's mind blowing. Mm-hmm. Pardon the pun, but it is. It's just like, because you think you can think your way out of everything. That's what we've been taught. But when there's a hardcore brain malfunction, whether that's through infection or injury or disease or whatever it is, it hijacks your entire life. So we've talked a little bit about technology. We've talked a little bit about activation. What was it you were saying about immunity, metabolic immunity? Yeah,
and so we've been talking about these different systems and pathways, kind of like they're wires or parts of a computer. Mm-hmm. But what we have to realize is it should be healthy living tissue. And that requires that the metabolic system's delivering the right nutrients, fuel, and sources to actually make it healthy tissue. And the other thing is, of course, the immune system. The brain is the most heavy immune regulated organ. And the reason for that is the immune system is responsible for clearing out dead and dying tissues, as well as protecting us from all these pathogens and toxins as well. So the brain, it's so metabolically active that the cells are constantly turning over. And then it's constantly forming new connections and breaking old connections. And all of that is the responsibility of the immune system. So for every neuron, there's something like, half a dozen to a dozen immune cells that are helping out that system. So this is why a lot of neurologic conditions like multiple sclerosis, the plaquing in Alzheimer's and all sorts of things, they're looking more at the interaction of the immune system, the microglia of the brain. So that needs to be explored too. And that's kind of that next realm. And that's also why inflammation is so toxic for the brain. Mm-hmm. Kind of that systemic body inflammation is going to ramp up inflammation in the brain as well. And it's being shown in the past in different viral conditions too, that can lead to autoimmunity in different brain tissues or other tissues as well. And of course, then not clearing stuff out of the system can lead to this chronic inflammation as well. So that kind of becomes the next picture and window into things as well. So
one of the things we talked about last time was your own actual return to health and healing, and that you had dropped a bunch of weight, in a fairly short period of time. Are you still working on that? Because part of that was getting rid of a bunch of inflammation. So do you have any updates? Because that was it was interesting. I think it'd be interesting for people to hear.
Yeah, definitely. So for those that didn't hear, basically after the holiday season and that initial fall, winter sluggishness, I had put on a whole bunch of weight and was just starting to feel sluggish and run down. And of course, that also leads to not being as sharp as I wanted to be as well. So being an autopilot for the things that I was constantly doing and good at, but obviously being restrained by how my brain was functioning and how inflamed and run down I was, to picking up new things or to perform the way I wanted to. And so I've done fasting in the past. And the great thing about fasting is you can drop a whole bunch of weight all at once. And people always kind of go, well, that's just water weight. And well, water weight is inflammation. So you're constantly drinking water and replenishing your fluids and everything else, but the puffiness around your face starts to decrease and the stomach and everything else. And that inflammation starts to decline and you start to feel clearer and better. And then it also promotes apoptosis, which is basically cell death, but a better way to put it is it's cell recycling. Is that you're taking the old rundown cars off of the road and recycling the parts and materials so that you can make better and new cars. So same with cells, you're taking the parts out of the cells that can be reused and then building healthier and new tissue instead of the rundown tissue that's there. And I'm continuing to work on it. Right now I'm in ketosis, so I've got a different fuel source for the brain as well. And I'm continue to see results with weight. If I was to care a lot about that, then I'd be counting the pounds. But basically I'm counting my energy and how clear and better I'm thinking, feeling. So that's the biggest thing. And I'm just glad to be able to share it with people so that hopefully, once again, if you're in that state where you're not feeling good, that you start investigating ways that you can improve it. And the other great thing too about the fasting and nutrition side of things is a lot of New Year's resolutions, people go straight into the exercise. well, you're already inflamed. And then when you first go into the exercise, you're going to stimulate the immune system, because that's what over exercising, especially when you're run down, does. So then you actually can ramp up the inflammation and the fogginess as well. So the fasting is sometimes a great place to start. And then if you don't want to do the fasting, then just start eating better before you go into the exercise part of things as well.
I think that's so interesting, because a lot of the stuff that we learned growing up is completely wrong. Right. Hit it harder, hit the gym harder. It's like, yeah, no, it's not necessarily that. Not that there's not times to, move your body and make it feel good, but really a lot of the Western training is very detrimental to our overall health and well-being, both short and long-term, like the increased risk of injury, especially if we're out of balance, when you just dive right into something and don't sort of get yourself recentered and reestablished, can really cause us long-term harm. And
you look at Western medicine, a lot of it, the side effects are neurologic.
What do you mean?
Right. A lot of it is to change the perception. So whether we're talking pain or anything else, sometimes it's designed to, once again, inhibit the way certain parts of the nervous system function so that you feel differently. You're taking away something instead of adding it. So.
Yeah. And even taking away your ability to self-assess what's going on and then not push yourself to get injured in the place where you're already hurt, which is, again, these funny, it's just so backwards what we do, right? It's just really very backwards. So for people who are looking for other tools, you can also come to the masteryourlife.ca shop page. On there, we have technology called Genius Biofeedback, which is a biofeedback that you can hold in your own hand and do your own self-assessments around your health and well-being. Yeah. So, and it's very effective. It's pretty incredible. Yeah, it's very incredible. And then also Leaha Qigong, which is about moving your body in ways that feel good, and also being able to self-assess what's going on physically. So do you actually have headaches, backaches, neck aches, sore legs, sore feet, heavy heart? Those are cold hands and feet. Like, there's all of these ways that you can assess your physical health. Just you're becoming mindful of it, right? Mindful meaning paying attention to what's going on in your body, not necessarily heading off into meditation land, but just noticing what's going on and then saying, well, how do I actually address that thing? In the last moments of the show, Dr. Dave, any words of wisdom for people who are looking to restore the balance in their physical body, in their mental body, in their brain?
Right. Can continue to learn and start to apply little tests to yourself that you can start to figure out, once again, just as you mentioned with the mindful side, to properly start to self-assess how you're feeling and doing, instead of waiting it to get to that position where things are a lot worse off. So yeah, I think that's the biggest takeaway from most of this. So
fantastic.
Continue with that improvement.
Yeah, exactly. A little self-assessment. Close your eyes, see if you can stand up without falling over. Go. Oh, hang on.
Do it in a safe place.
Do it in a safe place. Exactly right. Move the children and the grandchildren out of the way. Awesome. Well, thanks, Dr. David Hardy, for joining me once again. Everyone, we invite you to love yourselves, love each other, mind your minds. That's all for us. Bye for now.
Thank you for being a part of our program today. Master Your Life is a presentation of Leaha Mattinson Enterprises, Inc. Join us next time on Master Your Life, helping you to discover the very best of you.